something that just really surprised me. And I told him that it was instrumental transcommunication, right? Electric voice phenomenon. When I first heard about it, I thought this cannot be, there's no way. And he gave this presentation, and this was 20 years ago. And this wasn't Tony, it was somebody else. And I walked away from that presentation just blown away. And so, about 6 weeks ago, I got contacted by Jack Engstrom of the Arthur Young Foundation, who had come upon Tony's work. And I thought, wow, what a coincidence. And how interesting to see the advancements that have been made in the last 20 years. So, super exciting. I'm glad you're all here. And I will just tell you that Tony Rathman is a seasoned paranormal investigator with over 14 years of experience in the field. As the founder and lead investigator of Entity Voices Paranormal Investigations, or EVPI, Tony has conducted investigations at hundreds of locations across the United States and abroad. Tony's at the forefront of EVP and ITC research and is currently developing an innovative device called Staticom, which he will tell us about. Tony is the creator, producer, and co-host of the long-running podcast Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence. He's also produced and edited the docuseries Knowingly Talking to the Unknown on Paraflix, which I've never heard of. So maybe you can, I think that's exciting. Tony has been featured on numerous paranormal podcasts, television shows, and documentaries. He and his wife, Cherie, run the weekly live Facebook broadcast Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence, where they share and discuss some of the best captures from paranormal investigations around the world. So, Tony, I'm so happy to welcome you and to hear what you have to say about your research and everything that's going on. So, take it away.
All right. Well, first of all, let me say thank you for having me on to talk about this method which we call Staticom, and I'll get deeper into this as we go through this. But when we first started 15 years ago now, I didn't believe any of this. I was a hardcore skeptic. My wife got interested in paranormal shows when they started coming out, and she kept saying to me, "You got to come over and watch this. You're going to love it." I'd last about 2 minutes, get up and say, "Nope, none of this is real. This is for television only. None of this exists." And I'd walk away. Well, then she tricked me one Valentine's Day back in 2010, and she said, "I want to do something different." I said, "Okay, what do you want to do?" She said, "I want to go ghost hunting." And I was just like, "Oh, kidding me." But I had two choices. I could take her or have her mad at me until next Valentine's Day. Didn't want that, so I took her, bought her some inexpensive equipment, night vision camera, digital recorder, EMF meter, and we went. I played along, I asked questions. She had a really good time for the weekend. That was all I cared about. But it was when she got the stuff home and she started reviewing it. And what caught my attention the most were EVPs. We were the only one up at 3 in the morning. We were in the basement of the hotel, which we technically weren't even supposed to be in. We were asking questions alone, just the two of us, and we had voices that responded to the question we asked. So I didn't know how that was happening. I said, maybe there's an air vent that it was coming through from another room. So I said, let's go back and check. So we went back. There was no vent. There were no voices leaking in from outside or from any other part of the building. And we came back with additional voices. So this went on for quite a while. Finally, I said, okay, let's look into this. Let's go to other locations. Let's reach out. Let's expand our investigation. We did. We expanded all through Arizona, then Nevada, California, New Mexico, and then all across the country. And then eventually we reached out. We've investigated in Japan and the Philippines, which we were able not only to get voices, but voices in other language. Luckily, my wife speaks 3 languages. She speaks English, Tagalog, and Japanese. So that definitely helps, but they normally respond in a language that can be understood by the individuals they're responding to. Luckily, my wife has multiple. But that fascination led us for years down EVP research, then into ITC. I was fascinated with spirit boxes developed by Frank Sumption. So we tested those. Did they work? Yeah. I knew we were getting responses, but what I hated about it was the overpowering static noise, the fact that I couldn't really understand what was being said. And so that was frustrating. And so then we started to build our own. And we built different devices over a 12-year period. I think there's 14 of them laying on shelves here in the house, which we don't touch anymore. I haven't touched one in almost 4 years, and because of Staticom. So the easiest way for me to get into this is kind of explaining about ITC and spirit communication. So first of all, what's the goal? Well, the goal for spirit contact is to get them to respond, to get the proof that they are responding. We've also found out over the years that people who have lost someone, it really helps with bereavement and grief. It gives us insight into what life is like for them and sheds some answers on the entire research process that we've been going through. So a little brief history of ITC. EVP has been around since the single wire recorder. People have identified them. People have realized that there are voices coming through that are not there, not in person or disembodied voices. So EVP has been around a while. Then a gentleman named Frederick Jurgensen developed a system called direct radio voice, which is similar to a spirit box, but a spirit box scans radio stations. And the theory is that spirits will take the fragments of audio from radio and readjust them into their own sentences. But through our research, we realized that we don't believe that happens. We believe that all that is needed is the white noise, and direct radio voice sat on a vacant frequency. So it didn't scan up and down the dial. It sat on static. And that's how Frederick Jurgensen got voices. He passed that information on to Konstantin Radava. Radava did hundreds of tests, got similar results, and then he passed it on to a gentleman who's probably the most well-known for it, is Marcello Bacci. And he did it for about 35 years. He would bring the public in who had lost children or husband or wife or significant other, and he'd get messages, and these people could hear those messages. Marcello Bacci was also pulled into a scientific lab and tested. And he is the only one to our record and to our research whose scientists could not dismiss what was happening or explain it for that matter. They pulled his vacuum tubes out of his radio one by one. Marcello still got voices, even down to the third one or the last one. When they pulled, he still got voices. The only thing they could remove to keep the voices from coming through were Marcello himself. So we believe there is a connection between the operator and the device. So then the next question becomes, how did Staticom become Staticom from direct radio voice? Because direct radio voice is where we started. We were using a radio, leaving it on a static station. And why did we remove the radio? Well, there are two major criticisms in ITC. And whether that be EVP or ITC, and what's the difference? Well, the difference is that ITC was termed by a gentleman named Ernst Sinkowski. And the difference between EVP and ITC is that ITC was supposed to be two-way communication, where EVP is record and review, meaning I turn the recorder on, I ask all my questions, then I take it home, plug it into my computer, amplify it, denoise it, try to clean it up to hear what's being said. So we removed the radio because the two biggest complaints from scientists and skeptics were that A, you're hearing warbles and artifacts of sound. It's not really speech. And your brain, through pattern recognition, is trying to make sense of what you're hearing, and you're thinking you're hearing something that's truly not there. Then the second biggest complaint of ITC was, okay, you're using a radio, and then you're trying to tell me you're receiving vocal information from outside of this world, how do you determine reception from deception? And that's a very good point because, yeah, you're using a radio. What does a radio do? It takes an RF signal in the atmosphere, turns it into speech or music, and there's talking. So being able to determine what is a radio frequency and what is a spirit voice makes it difficult. So we said two things. One, we have to remove the radio. And two, we have to make the vocals so clear that no one will dispute what was being said and they will all agree they heard the same thing. So that was the process we went after. We wanted to prove that this works, and DRV did. When we reconstructed DRV, we were able to get answers, but they were somewhat limited. We had a problem with the speech staying clear, and it would revert back to what sounded like stray radio. So then, how do we believe these voices are coming through? Well, when we removed the radio, we replaced it with a white noise generator. A white noise generator cannot pick up any auditory wave, not from radio, satellite, walkie-talkies, CB, ham radio, baby monitors, nothing. It doesn't have the ability to do that. It produces every sound the human ear can hear from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, which is what normal human hearing can hear. And the other advantages is that it's at a spectral frequency of 1, meaning every sound is at the same level, not one higher than the other or causing fluctuations. It's solid, even across all frequencies. When we determined that we could get the same voices we were getting from radio with a white noise generator, that switch was easy to make and took away the low-hanging fruit from scientists saying you're getting stray radio waves. No longer possible. Radio waves cannot be picked up by a white noise generator. It is a closed circuit system, meaning that the white noise is pumped into the computer. The computer does nothing but filtrate the white noise, meaning it cleans it up, it denoises it. And then the other thing we had to do, because we realized that spirits would speak so fast that what sounded like a syllable, when slowed down to 50%, was an actual sentence. So we made Staticom do everything that's done in EVP or record and review in real time. It cleans it, it slows it down 50%, it filtrates it, and then what we do is through the physics principle of stochastic resonance, and stochastic resonance is used in medical equipment and all sorts of other functions. But stochastic resonance is the process of taking white noise to elevate a signal that is not detectable either by the human ear or by a sensor. And what happens is that the white noise elevates that signal up to make it detectable, which is what we did with Staticom. But then we go through at the end and we cut the white noise out because it's at a spectral frequency of 1. We know where it lives. And that leaves only the voice that you hear. No white noise, no static, no contamination like a spirit box with radio wave signals. It's pure voice. So how do we evaluate the evidence that we're getting? Well, it's real simple: timing and relevance. What question did I ask? How long did it take to come in? And did the answer the question that I asked? And that's what we use for understanding if the response that came in was, from a timing standpoint and a relevant standpoint to the question asked, is that a legitimate answer? So then the last thing we always get asked is, how do you know who you're connecting with? Well, the bottom line there is we don't. We can assume based on what they tell us, what information they give us, and the things that are discussed when we're having a conversation. But the bottom line is, people say, well, how do you know they're not lying to you? How do you know this? Well, the fact of the matter is we don't, not yet. but it's part of the research. It's areas we have to focus on and going forward. So I'm going to play a clip next. And this clip was still direct radio voice. So it was still using a radio. I mentioned Marcello Bacci, who used direct radio voice for years. My wife is sitting with me. She says, Marcello, this is your method. I won't go through the rest. I'll let you hear it. But here's that clip.
Marcello, can you see us?
Yes.
Thank you. Marcello, you started this method. It's working. Can you please try to communicate with us?
So that kind of clarity coming from a voice that's coming out of nowhere was unique. But in a year of research, that was the clearest communication we had for the entire year of researching this. So we said, we've got to improve this. We've got to find ways to make that clarity more consistent, to keep the clarity as the method runs, because it would go clear like that for a sentence or two and then disappear. And you'd hear garbled, mumbled speech, and that could last 15 minutes. That could last 2 days. That could last a week. So we knew that we weren't there yet. So then from there, we went from DRV to Staticom. So the next clip I'm going to play improves on the clarity of speech, and it allows for a little longer conversation. So the next clip I'm going to play is one where they called me out by name. When I realized that they said my name, and they didn't, I asked them to say Tony. They actually said my full legal name. And when I realized they said it, I said, okay, you know who I am. Who am I speaking to? So here's that clip.
Marcello,
Oops, sorry.
can
you say Tony? Did you just say Rathman? Yep. So you know who I am. Can I know who you are? Yes, sir. Thank you. Who am I speaking to?
So again, first and last names, 2 of them given on the request for me asking who I'm speaking to. Now, again, remember, there is no AI involved here. There are no word banks. There are no mics. I'm speaking in my normal tone of voice in my house as I'm speaking right now without a mic in front of me. So for the communication to go from my vocals to wherever they are and however far away they are, which is why we believe that spirits are, there's a non-locality. It doesn't matter where they are. They can respond. So the next question that came to my mind was, I'm human. I have vocal cords. And when I speak, those vocal cords produce vibration and sound, which travels through the atmosphere. Another human standing in range of my vocals, 100 meters, 200 meters, they have follicles in their ear. When those vibrations hit their ear, those follicles vibrate. That vibration goes to a liquid center of the ear, which then begins to vibrate and then sends that vibration to the brain, which interprets it as speech. But what I wanted to know is if they are no longer embodied in human form, how do they hear me speak? So here's that response.
How do you hear me speak?
Now that's an amazing answer, because over years of doing EVP work, I can't tell you how many times the answer would show up on the recorder before I even finished asking the question. which validates energy of the mind, which we believe to be consciousness. I won't have a lot of time to go through our whole philosophy, but we took on a philosophical principle called analytic idealism, which says that there is a one universal mind, which all people are fractal portions of, meaning we're still part of it, but when we're human, we are a fraction of it. And that information between us as we are alive, that information still transfers back and forth between our individual consciousness and universal consciousness. Then when we pass away, we return back to universal consciousness, which then all of that information in universal consciousness is how it grows and how universal consciousness expands. It's also the reasons when people say, okay, you're using a digital recorder and you're talking to a spirit from the 1800s, they wouldn't even know what that is. Well, if they're part of universal consciousness, they would have access to all knowledge and there would be no lack of information, even with current devices. All right, so from here, I've got one more of 2.0, so let's play that one. This one's really interesting because not only does it show that free will goes with you when consciousness survives death, but that also personality, sense of humor, and everything in between is still there, and you'll hear that on this next clip.
How many spirits are with us right now?
300.
300? Did you say 300?
So that was an incredible answer to me. Not only did I asked him how many spirits are here. They responded 300. Then I questioned the answer he gave me. Did you say 300? The response was, what was that the wrong answer? You know, kind of like humoring me based on the fact of what I asked. So now we're going to move. That was Staticom 2.0. So now we move to 3.0. This was our last upgrade done about 3.5 months ago. What we fixed in 3.0 was, again, additional clarity. 2, the voices don't become unclear anymore. We fixed that problem. We realized what was going on, why that was occurring, and we fixed it. So now we can literally run the thing for hours and never have the voices degrade or go away. And they will continue to ask and answer questions until either we stop asking or shut the machine down. So this particular clip that I'm about to play was literally captured by my wife when I was still doing the programming to upgrade from 2.0 to 3.0, and these voices just showed up. So the problem going forward with 3.0 isn't a problem yet, but what you're about to hear in the next set of clips, we never got to ask scientific questions. This was brand new. This was the night they started talking. But what you're going to hear is the two-way communication that goes back and forth. So here's that next clip.
Speaker. Who are you trying to find? You're nervous. What?
Right there.
Yeah. Are you trying to send us a message?
Roger. Roger meaning yes or Roger meaning Roger?
Are you talking about Roger Martin?
Yes, Martin.
Okay, so again, we have a friend named Roger Martin who is also participating in Staticom. They were clearly referring to him. The questions that my wife was asking, answers were coming through. So, very unique. So in that clip, you heard him say perfect right there. Well, I was adjusting. And when he said perfect right there, I stopped. And we haven't moved that setting since that day because they literally told us exactly where it should be put. So people who ask, did the entities or the spirits or consciousness give you information to help you dial this in? That answer is absolutely yes. And the next clip I'm going to play is going to show that, because we were dealing with other aspects. We were trying to get better. And I asked them up or down. They literally gave me the exact number with me not even saying the dial that I had numbers, and they told me exactly where to put it. Here's that clip.
Up or down, spirits? Seven. Okay. I can go to 7.
So again, that setting has not changed yet either, probably never will, because it works, it holds the communication, and but they gave us the number. Okay, so the next one I'm going to play is a couple nights later, came home from work, flipped it on. I wanted to see if it was still functioning the way that it should, the way that it was. Again, this is just me asking questions and answers that come through. So here is that clip.
Rathman, I heard you say Rathman. Yes. What did you want to say to Roger? It's Tony. Spirits, can you hear me? Yes, okay. That was a loud voice that just answered. What's your name? That's a strange name. How many spirits are here with us right now? A lot? A lot, yeah, that's what I thought you said. Because there's so many of you, is that why all the background chatter? They're talking? Do you have any messages for us? Rathman, I heard that.
So again, that shows clearly two-way communication with something that is not in our house, not anywhere visible to us, but yet timing and relevance, questions asked, responses show up in a timely manner. Now that was probably about a 30-minute session. It is cut together because I don't have time to play a 30-minute video, but so then I'm going to play one more. This was additional questions showing the two-way communication. So here is that clip.
time what? Well, I can hear you when you whisper, you know that, right? Spirits, if you're not familiar with this device is called Staticom. If you heard me say Staticom. That's better.
Now, can you say Staticom for me, please?
Alright, Spirits, if you don't want to say Staticom, let's play another game. What am I holding in my hand? Glasses, thank you. Thank you very much. How about pineapple? Can you say pineapple? Oh, perfect, thank you. How come you can't say Staticom like that?
It's one word.
It's one word, Staticom. Have you not been able to talk to humans before? If you can hear me, spirits, say elephant.
Do you know Tony?
It's me. If we use this device to help cold cases, will you answer the questions? Yeah, sure. You bet. Thank you.
That will help.
That'll help a lot.
So again, showing the fact that no matter what we ask, responses come through. They even said a statement in Tagalog, which my wife clearly understood, and I think I put the English translation underneath it. But the one thing we asked here is we started thinking, okay, can we use this for cold cases? We know that they will give us answers from things that have already happened, but they will not give answers to future. And we believe that's because of what we call universal laws, that they're not allowed to affect the life that we were set here to live, how we were supposed to learn, grow, and advance. And if they were to change that, that is forbidden and against what we call universal laws. But about a week and a half ago, my wife and I had a very unfortunate news that a friend of ours was murdered. And so the clip I'm going to play, most of it's hidden just because it was an emotional aspect. But we asked, do you know what happened? Do you know who did it? And you are going to hear exactly what came through. So here is that clip.
Yes, he was shot. Lenin, did you know that you were shot? Do you have a message for your family? To your mom? I saw you how they shot you. Or shoot you. Lenin, kilala mo ba kung sinong bumaril sa'yo? Yes, para mabigyan ka ng hustisya. Kilala mo ba kung sinong bumaril sa'yo? Just give me the name, Lenin, so I can help you. Did you know how you were killed? Lenin was shot and killed last Monday.
Lenin, do you know who did it or not? Yes. Can you give a name, please? Let's start with first name. What's his first name? Christian. Is that a name? Was Christian a name? Was Christian a first or last name? Okay, first name. Do you have a last name?
Okay, so can we prove any of that? No, not yet. But we posted it for one reason. If the investigation finds who did it and that matches, that supports the validity of what Staticom is capable of. So real quickly, we're probably into question time, so I apologize if I went over, but we can go to questions if that's what you like to do.
You have plenty of time, actually. It's only 20 to 7, so you
Oh, okay, perfect. So the next one, the last one I want to play. Actually, I'll play the last two. So here's one more. This was actually at a location that was supposed to be haunted, and this response was just amazing because we asked, "What's your favorite part of this house?" We expected them to say the den or the library, and this house was out on 5,000 acres. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was probably a half a day ride by horse out there. But this answer just blew us away. But here's that response.
What's your favorite part of this house? What room?
Which again, this was the early 1800s. This house was built, I think, 1829. For that answer to come through was completely relevant with timing and relevance and significance to the question we asked. And none of us were thinking about that. We were thinking they were going to say the den or, one of the rooms, because that's what we asked. But it was the safety of the house for the children to play. That was incredible. So the last clip I'm going to play is, like I said, when we started receiving these voices, we took them to audio engineers and said, "Can you review this for us? We want to know, does this sound like warbles and artifacts of sound like scientists claim ITC to be?" This gentleman responding is an audio engineer. He's also into ITC, but here's that clip.
My name is Joshua Sean. I am an ITC engineer and career audio engineer. There are many objective attributes and characteristics that I specifically look and listen for in audio files of this nature. I utilize unbiased measurement equipment, both hardware and software, to gather data to help interpret and analyze what we may be visualizing, hearing, and generally perceiving. I am familiar with the Staticom team's instrumental transcommunication research, specifically direct radio voice and methods derived from early ITC pioneer Frederick Jurgensen and later Arcello Bacci. In reviewing many of the team's direct radio voice evidence and observing the results from the Staticom project, it is apparent these methods provide an objective and measurable advantage compared to many other methods of instrumental transcommunication. Staticom is currently omitting traditional radio components and instead utilizing white noise to proliferate an environment of pure stochastic resonance. This, in theory, allows the intelligent transcommunication access to a wide range of frequencies, represented with equal intensity and continuous spectral density. Very simply, the Staticom team is giving this miracle of communication every possible organically observable frequency to work with all at once, populating at almost every moment in time. The advantage of this method ensures stochastic and inverse stochastic resonance remains continuous and ever present to provide as a consistent environment for intelligent transcommunication to proliferate and be observed. When considering Staticom's current methods of ITC research and comparing them to other current methods, I see many objective and measurable advantages when reviewing their data and evidence. There are multiple examples in Staticom's evidence displaying high dynamic, higher amplitude phonetical consonants, diphthongs, and vowel sounds, uncommon and not typically found in baseline white noise, radio interfrequencies, or artifact-ridden noise-reduced audio. Staticom audiophiles exhibit vocal saturation at these detectable frequencies, the same as male and female human speech. This lends credible evidence to the probability of intentional transcommunication. The Staticom audiophiles analyzed and interpreted reveal unbiased, measurable data points typically found in the human voice actively communicating in a given language and not typically found even in the most artifact-saturated audio examples to date.
So that's a 40,000 foot overview of what we created.
Can you speak to, you mentioned the philosophy that you're working under.
Correct.
Can you give us that in a nutshell?
Sure.
You have a little bit of time.
Absolutely, I can.
Yeah, what is the worldview you're looking at?
Okay, so when we started to realize we were getting answers, and we literally had to take a step back and take a look at what we believed reality to be. And with what we were getting, what they were telling us, and the information that was coming through, we had to reevaluate how we believed not only life here on the 3D world, but the afterlife as well. And in viewing different philosophical positions, and there's lots of them, but analytic idealism, which basically says that consciousness is the ontological primitive, meaning it is the be-all, end-all of life. It is there in the universal mind. When people live, they're fractal portions of the universal mind still connected, which is how we believe this communication comes through. It's how we believe psychics get information, because they are porous enough to get that information to seep through. And it basically says that life as we know it is two things. One, it's subjective. My life can only be experienced by me, my mind, and through my senses. I cannot experience it through yours. You can't experience mine through mine. And so it's completely, everything is mental. The perception of what we consider to be objects or trees or rocks are a mental illustration of what we are perceiving our world to be, and not necessarily the reality of what it is, but a perception to us. It's a perception to us that allows us to function day to day without getting hit by a bus or, eating something we're not supposed to eat. But it is not the true reality of what is there. It's kind of the difference between when I look at my computer and I click on a little folder to open up files. That's a perception of what the computer is versus all the ones and zeros of data that are actually making it function. I'm seeing a representation of it. We also believe that our senses are similar to an airplane's dashboard of dials and instruments. The pilot can take the plane off using just the instruments. He doesn't even have to look out the window. He can land the plane by just using the instrumentation. But the instrumentation gives a perception of what's out the window, but is not the true reality. And that is the concept behind how we believe that life works.
That's so good. As you were showing those clips, I was thinking about mediums, right? Because you talked about that power of mind.
Right.
And I'm wondering, sort of two questions. There's a lot of questions. Um, because you don't know who you're talking to exactly. Some of them have identified themselves. And
Right.
in your original slide, you talked about sort of disembodied spirits, right? Intelligences, but you also mentioned consciousness, the pure
Correct.
consciousness, or off-world beings.
Well, that's very possible. People
You
ask
have
us
no
that all
idea,
the
right?
time.
Yeah.
Are you speaking to extraterrestrials? Are you speaking to multi-dimensional creatures? We don't have that answer yet. Could we be? We could. So many variables there for research to understand and figure out, and we may never figure those out in this lifetime. But is it a possibility? Yes, it is.
Do you get the sense that so I think I told you when we talked before that I had a dream probably 10 years ago of a dear friend of mine who had passed, came to me in a dream. And for one reason, I asked her why she had come, and she said, I want to let you know that there are people on both sides of the veil that are working to make communication happen,
Stations. Yep.
right? And I thought, okay, thanks for telling me that. But and I remember I thought I heard something in Radovan's work. Um, I remember from 20 years ago what they said. There were people who specifically said, "We're here. We're on the other side. We're trying to make this happen with you. This is sort of like a team project." Do you get that sense?
Oh, absolutely. Half the information we got to make settings work, we believe came from the North American station. Yes. Which supposedly consists of people like Radave, Einstein. Can I prove that? No, I can't. But based on what was said, what was the information that was spelled out on what we needed to do and why they wanted to help, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that you're being helped. And so is that possible? Absolutely it is.
Do you
Even Tesla said when he was still alive, if I don't figure this out before my time here is done, I hope to help on the other side.
from the other side? I'll let you know. I mean, I think that's great. Do you have a sense of um like when you figure out like what next steps are, right? Is that coming from you, or do you think that's coming from? Do they communicate with you telepathically or in through your intuition? Do you think, or is it just through the machine?
Well, I would have said a month ago, just through the machine, or maybe not a month ago, maybe 4 months ago. But when I knew that I needed to do an upgrade from 2.0 to 3.0, I literally stuck it in my head that I'm going to do this. Did I know exactly what I needed to do or how I needed to do it? The answer to that question was no, not really. I had some ideas, but I literally, they say that thought is what becomes reality. And I put it in my head, not only in my conscious mind, but in my subconscious mind, that I was going to do this. I was going to find a way to clear this conversation to a T, and I did do it. So, do I believe that had an impact? No, I wouldn't have said that 4 months ago, but now I will say it because, yeah, I think that could that thought have come from universal consciousness, filtered into mine? The exact process of how that works, I don't know, but I can guarantee you your thoughts do change your reality.
Absolutely. Okay, I have a couple questions here. Bob wants to know if you have done any work with the Brazilian University working with ITC or Gary Schwartz at the University of Arizona in Tucson.
Yeah, I have reached out to Gary Schwartz. The biggest, well, he didn't actually respond to me, but I saw it posted in one of his articles. And his response was, because I was not a PhD. Well, he didn't say me particularly, but he said people who are getting clear vocal responses. He said because they don't have a PhD background and they're not associated with a large university, that they didn't want to go down that road.
Interesting.
That's what we thought.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting response. I mean, yeah. But you come to think of it, I mean, not that all uncommon, I think, for people in academia.
Yeah, I mean, they have a reputation to protect. I understand that. And there's a lot of colleague association review. And so I get it. But we are trying so hard to get scientific research into what we've created because it needs it, it deserves it. And this isn't some sort of, you know, paranormal gadget. We didn't build this to make money. This was done for pure research and it works.
Yeah. Are you familiar with other devices that people are, I'm sure there are a number of other people that are working on similar things.
There are ones working on similar things. Samuel in Brazil has his own stuff. We communicate all the time. There's a gentleman named Eamon in Europe who's been doing some fantastic results. And then there's tons of other people that are working on, you know, similar communication, getting similar results. Everybody's got their own hurdles to overcome and figure out how to solve. But progress in the last probably 5 to 8 years has really stepped up. Some of that's technology, some of it's open-mindedness. But yeah.
Yeah. So two people mentioned work being done in Brazil. Sonia Rinaldi,
Yes.
in Brazil, and I was wondering if, you know, Brazil has a big tradition of spiritism. I think they're kind of more open to the idea of being communicated with than maybe our culture is. So
Yeah,
do
and
you think that contributes?
yeah, oh, I completely agree. And one of the great things about Sonia is that she does ITC as well, but she's been focusing lately on imagery. But if we could somehow combine her spirit imagery with our vocalization, we might be on the path to eventually, you know, I don't know how long, but to create an actual physical device that you can see and hear.
Does it help? I mean, have you tried like having a medium in the room? And
Yes.
and does that help focus the energy at all, or does it shed any light on what's happening?
Yes. We've done work with multiple mediums. If they truly have the ability they say they do, the way that it complements each other is mind blowing. The medium will say something, Staticom will finish the sentence or expand on it. You know, we had a medium say, oh, somebody passed away here. Staticom spit out the name. And then we went back and researched it. Yep, that was correct. They can play off each other in ways unlike anything seen before. But we've also had Staticom running. Medium came up, said, you know, I'm a medium, blah, blah, blah. I'd like to take, you know, Staticom said she has no abilities.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's no hiding. I think there's no hiding.
No. All your thoughts, everything you think, all your intentions, what you plan to do with it, how you plan to promote it or say that, you know, spirit communicate. You can't hide anything in your mind. They know it all.
Mhm.
So you have to have true heart, truth of what you're planning to do and how you're planning to present it, or they will know.
So Daryl went to Grok to get I think a definition of or some information on stochastic resonance, and says this: stochastic resonance shows how noise, often seen as a nuisance, can be harnessed to improve detection or performance in systems ranging from biology to technology. It's a reminder that randomness isn't always the enemy.
No, and that's a good definition. The only part of that definition I don't like is that white noise technically is not random. And what's the definition of random? Random just means you can't break it down any further. It's an empty drawer, meaning that, you know, there's no breakdown of it. But technically, is white noise random? No, technically it's not. There are hundreds, thousands of signals, all at a spectral frequency of 1, evenly placed. There's technically no randomness in there, but the fact that it does elevate signals undetectable, which is since white noise also has no vocal data in it.
Right.
That means that these voices are not coming from white noise. The white noise is elevating them, which is why back in 1949, a European philosopher by the name of Gilbert Ryle ripped apart Rene Descartes' mind-body dualism theory, saying that, you know, you're trying to say that the body is this thing and there's a separate entity, the mind, or in our case, consciousness. And he mockingly called the mind the ghost in the machine. And then in the late 80s, the ghost in the machine term was used to say that computers are getting smarter and smarter. They're going to develop their own consciousness and take over the world. But the fact of the matter is today, I use that term ghost in the machine because consciousness can use electronic devices to communicate. And that is how Staticom works. And stochastic resonance or inverse stochastic resonance brings that voice into the detectable range of our hearing. And that's how we hear them speak.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
Bob says in near-death studies, many people died and came back and said that entities they saw in the other realm were able to heal their physical bodies. Have you asked them if they said if they are able to heal people on the physical side? Can the entities on the other side help heal people on this side?
We have not asked that yet. We asked a ton of research questions with 2.0. Since the upgrade to 3.0, we have not had a chance to get into the research questions yet. I was just talking to my wife this morning. I said, this starts next weekend. We get into the research questions. There are so many questions to ask. People say, well, how were the pyramids built? Did Atlantis exist? I could spend the rest of my life asking questions, but I don't want to stop the research. I don't want to stop the progression of it. So there has to be a balance.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was wondering I don't know if I would be able to understand what the next steps are sort of technologically for, sort of Staticom 4.0. What are you focusing on?
Focusing on lots of things.
In
One,
that I can
always
understand.
the clarity.
Yeah.
The length of interaction. Right now, I think we've got the length solved. They don't stop talking. The system is set up. I mean, Tesla said, you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, which was a profound statement because what's white noise? Energy, frequency, and vibration. What do we believe spirits are after the energy leaves the body and switches over to the other side? Energy, frequency, and vibration. People always say, well, how do they speak? They don't have vocal cords. Energy, frequency, and vibration. How does a guitar make sound? Energy of your thumb plucking a string, the string vibrates, produces a frequency of sound. And they say, well, yeah, but they don't have vocal cords. Well, does your radio have vocal cords? No, it doesn't. But what are you hearing? Speech. You don't need vocal cords to produce speech. You need energy, frequency, and vibration.
Like Tesla said.
Like Tesla said, right?
Yeah. Tamara said her sister who died 5 years ago, my sister who died about 5 years ago, I talked to every year on her birthday. This past time when I talked to her, said now she is educating friends on the other side that they can communicate with the living. And this is a surprise to people sometimes who have passed, she's found. I asked her if that means she's now anti-medium and she laughed. So
Yes.
Interesting, right? It's sort of like education on both sides. That
it absolutely is. And did you hear on one of the clips I played where the woman said, Roxy, he's talking to us, like surprised, knowing that I was speaking to them.
Yeah.
But you heard and that's the other great thing about vocals is I can tell if it's male or female. I can tell if it's an adult or child. I can tell their emotional state. I can tell if they have a territory accent or dialect with how they speak. Even when Bocce replied, I'd say, glad to meet you. You could still hear that European, Italian dialogue, even though he was speaking English. And that, to me, far outweighed any other research equipment out there. It's a bucket load of information handed right to you.
Yeah, because it shouldn't be.
It
Right?
shouldn't be.
Because
Correct.
if it's just frequency in the white noise, it should almost sound robotic,
Correct. But
right?
there's accents, there's pitches, there's emotional,
There's
constant
emotion in there.
fall, diphthongs, right? That
Yeah.
should not exist in anything random.
Just crazy. Jerry says, Dan Drazen. Do you know Dan?
I do. He wrote Calling Earth.
Calling
Not
Earth.
the nicest gentleman in the world.
He's actually on right now,
Oh.
listening. I saw his name in the participant.
Awesome.
He says you might want to communicate with him, but you clearly have.
Well, I spoke with him. We have a mutual friend, Alexander McCrae, who's done a lot of work on this. But yeah, I would love to speak to Daniel about what we're working on. Absolutely.
I think I have gotten to all the questions so far. And I just want to remind anybody, if you want to raise your hand and speak directly to Tony, you may. I think I have all of that. Here's one more. Tony, have you found that it takes an operator to spend time working with their instrument or their device to develop something like mediumship to achieve good results? So is there I think, John, are you asking about like a coherence between or a resonance between the operator and the machine?
Yeah, that's what I believe he's asking. And he's absolutely correct. Why do we believe that? Well, we will do public events and have 30, 40, 50 people in the audience to listen, to hear what I ask, and then hear the responses that come through. Then we let the participants come up and ask their own questions. And a lot of the times they'll get an answer. Other times somebody will come up and ask something and nothing comes through. Then I'll repeat their question and say, spirits, they asked whatever they asked, and then the answer shows up. So is there a connection between the operator and the device? Absolutely. We've also noticed that when the audience first starts out, the first half hour, 45 minutes, whatever, the answers aren't as profound as they are as the audience dwindles. You know, the first people that are coming in there, they're talking with each other, they're eating a bag of Cheetos, not fully paying attention. When those people get up and leave and the energy within the audience raises levels, it makes a big difference on the responses. And that includes me. Like my wife said to me, I don't know how many times, I will test Staticom nightly. She's like, you're in a bad mood. Don't do it tonight. And she's absolutely right. My emotional state, my mental state, my attitude, whether I'm happy or upset, plays a big role.
That makes a lot of sense, right? Because the operator is integral, it seems like.
Correct.
Right, like you said. Bob wants to know if you have any plans to bring a device like this to market.
It was never designed for that. The request for it, though, has been overwhelming. But because we're researchers, because we're focused on that, we'd like to get this scientifically analyzed before we release anything saying, oh, it can do this, oh, it can do that. We know what it can do. Right. But we want the world to know what it can do before we sell or release anything.
It might be interesting to do sort of a crowdsourced research something, with people had a bunch of machines and to develop a research study using multiple machines across distance.
We had former partners for the first 3 years. So we used to do cross communication between their machine and ours. Now ours we've upgraded to 3.0, but we could ask what they were doing and be told. I was doing a session one time, I hadn't even spoke to him, and he asked, how many people does Tony have at his session? They got the response of 30. 30 was dead on. That's what we had.
Wow. Bob says use a small select group of beta testers and let them beat it up.
The only other concern is it's not like a spirit box that you turn it on and you're good to go. This requires knowledge of sound, it requires physics principles, and it requires patience. When I played that first one from the DRV, that was the clearest response we had in a year. A year.
Wow. Yeah. So this is a very long and iterative process, right?
Correct.
As all good research is. It's been scientist. Oh, Sherry says it's been scientist authenticated Staticom legitimacy. I think she's saying
that was probably to the fact of whether we're going to release it. Not until we get a research group, a consciousness group, but until science can go, okay, yeah, we don't know what's going on here. Either that answer, or they can, because the other portion of this is that if we're wrong, and I don't believe we are, but is it possible? Of course it is. If they could come back and say, no, this is what's happening, you're picking up, I don't know how we would be, it's a closed circuit system, but if that's the case, we want to know.
Exactly. Because you're scientists.
Well,
right?
It's research. And if we're wrong, we want to know it.
Absolutely. So Peggy has a really interesting question. Are there potentials for abuse of this technology? If so, speak about that and safeguards.
Well, did you hear the response that said you did it, thankful, and then one of them was be careful.
Be careful. I was going to ask you about that. What did you think that was referring to?
I know exactly what it's referring to. We do. Think about who would like to get a hold of this. Think about if it's in the wrong hands. That's dangerous. But we were helping a psychic get some questions to a cold case, and we did our recording. We turned them in to her. She turned them over to the department that was researching it. We got a call about 3 days later from the FBI wanting to know how we got these answers and where they came from. And so I said, well, it was a machine we built. It came from spirits, the other side. And he said, did you patent this? And I said, no. And he goes, why not? I said, well, if I patent it, I have to lay out every section of how it's put together, every functioning piece. And I said, that's public knowledge. You could just go look it up. He goes, good point. But those are dangerous as well. I mean, governments trying to figure out what other governments are doing. Yeah, this isn't something that can be put in the wrong hands. And that is a fear.
Yeah.
Even Tesla knew that.
I was going to say, yeah, that's sort of the world we live in right now, right? And it has been for a while.
Correct.
Yeah. So the admonition to be careful from the other side is kind of right. Right?
Right.
Tony, be careful. The FBI does not come and take it away like a lot of free energy scientist devices.
Right. I can build another one.
Yeah.
It is in my head so ingrained that, but is that a possibility? Yeah. And not fair. 15 years this took.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it is a concern.
So can you let us know how people can contact you if they want to, and how they can listen to your podcasts and
absolutely,
follow what you're doing?
Sure. So we have a website called entityvoices.com. There is everything on there from investigations we've done in the past, but the main attraction to it right now is Staticom. There's clips. There is an array of podcasts we've done, speeches, information on Staticom. There's a blog, which I talk about article after article after article about future progression, how we believe universal consciousness versus consciousness works, the importance of the fact that we're all part of one mind. That's what gives validity to experience. If life was just subjective, there'd be no meaning in it. But if every person on the planet is part of that experience, that's where validity and meaning comes from. There's clips. We also have a YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and just type in Staticom, you'll go right to it. I have a Facebook page, Tony Rathman, and I got about 5 other ones with Staticom stuff on it. There's a Tony Rathman, there's a Staticom, there's an Entity Voices. But those are the best ways to get a hold of us. You can contact us. There's ways to email and all sorts of other contacts.
Fantastic. I love this so much, and I just think this is so fascinating, and how everything really points to consciousness.
It does.
It ultimately, it's all about consciousness and evolving our consciousness and expanding how we see ourselves in the world and our relationship to everything else.
Correct. And if we're all part of the same mind, I mean, there's no way a universal mind could grow without that additional experience. So I understand it deviates from physicalism or materialistic science, who says if the brain dies, the body dies, consciousness dies. But if consciousness dies, who is answering me without me transmitting my voice? How is that possible? And then there's things to say like, okay, well, what else can be learned from this? How is that happening from wherever they are and at that speed? Could that change internet speeds? Could it, how many doors could it open? But there's so much to learn. And, in the right hands, this needs to be looked at.
Absolutely. And Sherry mentioned again the documentary, Knowing.
Yes. I produced that about 2.5, 3 years ago. It does not compete with Daniel Drazian's Calling Earth, but it's along the lines, I remember watching that when I was young, and that's got my interest in this. But it explains how we developed Staticom, how it went to DRV, how we realized white noise was the catalyst, not RF. It talks to the clip I played from the audio engineer. That's in there explaining how these voices mimic human speech, not warbles and artifacts of sound. And it just goes through every aspect of how we created Staticom.
Yeah, fantastic. Really fascinating work. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And if you have questions, follow him, or you can contact Tony on any number of social media or his
Right.
website. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you all. Thank you, Tony. Best of luck in the future. Can't wait to see what comes next.
It's going to be exciting, no doubt about it.
It is exciting. Can you put the website in the chat? It's staticom.com, right?
The website, entityvoices.com.
Oh, entityvoices.com. There you go. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening, and we'll see you next time. All right. Thanks, Tony.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.